Hey, good evening, one and all. Joe Driscoll here, back with the Salt City Grind. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We had a great episode on Tuesday with Chief Kenton Buckner. Was pretty wild, good stuff. And tonight I'm joined by my friend Chris Ryan. How you doing, sir?
I'm wonderful, Joe. How you doing?
Good.
Great.
Good.
Listen, before we get into all this, great haircut. I like it.
I was out on the back porch, my wife with the clippers. We're keeping it very Swiss Family Robinson around here. It's very back to nature around our house.
Love it.
Yeah. How about you guys? Are you we're gardening, we're doing all types of stuff here in this COVID. How's your family getting along during the COVID?
Family's doing well. I thought with all the stuff that I've been doing around the house, I would have scored some more brownie points with my better half. But now we're doing great. Lockdown, getting through it. I got four kids in school, so that was always that wasn't easy, but we're just dealing like everybody else is dealing. You have to, right? Just keep on keeping on over here. We're good.
That's it, brother. So you are Onondaga County Legislator, 8th District. Talk to us about your background, what inspired you to run for office, why'd you go for it, and some of that stuff to give people some context of who you are and what you've been up to.
Yeah, so I guess politics a long time ago with my uncle Ed being in politics on the county legislature, minority leader for a long time, ran for state assembly, doing a lot of. I think my involvement into politics and public service, was navigated through my union, union advocacy and my position as a union representative for the CWA. But so being on the legislature for, 10, 11 years now. And before that, for 6 years on the Gaddis Town Board. So I've been doing this for about close to 2 decades now. So it's enjoyed it. It's been quite a long ride. The county ledge is a little bit different than the town board, but it's been good. You deal with property issues, tax issues, and constituent services, and it's interesting. So it's great. So yeah, I guess it's in the family, in the blood. So I've enjoyed it.
There you go. So for those who don't know what CWA is, maybe you can explain, what CWA is and what your role in the union, what did that look like, that gig representing for CWA?
Yeah, CWA, Communications Workers of America. Our local here is a local affiliate, which is Local 1123. We represent the Verizon employees here, Central New York, British Onondaga County, Oswego County, and then west all the way out to Geneva. We represent American in American Red Cross too, another one of our bargaining units. So, and I was obviously a union member, but 2002 ran for the executive board. So I was elected to the executive vice president, served from EVP starting in 2003 up to about 7-8 years ago. And I've been the president of the local for that long. So we represent about 750 members, union members who work here. Our customer service tech support out of Thompson Road, and part of the bargaining committee and negotiating contracts and advocacy for workers' rights, and on behalf of that. So labor relations.
Great. So, always be happy to have you on. The show has been just taking characters in the 315 and kind of chatting it out and seeing what's going on with them. But I wanted to bring you on for, in particular right now, you've got new legislation coming up. Talk to us about, redistricting in the Onondaga County. Tell us about gerrymandering and what these maps mean and what this, what this legislation you're proposing is about.
Yeah. So, yeah, great. So thank you. Yeah. So I think, let me just go back. I've been probably working on this for, 3, 4, even the better part of 4 years now, which started out as introducing an advisory commission to the existing reapportionment. So which speaks to, in the county charter, a representative of the Board of Elections, 2 of the elections, a representative from the majority party of the legislature, minority party, the chairman of the legislature, and an appointment from the county executive. I thought that needed to be changed. The manner in which the district maps were redrawn almost a decade ago In my opinion, and many others, I don't think that that was their good product. I thought we certainly could have done better. So that was then going forward, and then gerrymandering is taken in the bigger context nationwide. Congressional districts, Supreme Court cases, appellate court cases, one out of Wisconsin, one was in Maryland, that went all the way up to the appellate court to Virginia, and then also in North Carolina, congressional districts. And, I think that the general public, the general populace, just I think disenfranchisement when the power, when the political party in power draws maps for their own perseverance, I guess, isn't a good model. And I think that we needed to change that. So I took a step back and said, let's look at a different way to do this. And then, unfortunately, in March of last year, 2019, it was vetoed down in a party line vote. So I thought that if that's not going to be good enough, let's just change the charter. So that was an enactment of a local law. So that's what we have now, the finished product. I've been working on that. So what I've done is I thought that the changes needed to happen was an independent redistricting commission. Let the citizens handle it. Let's put the power back in the people and the citizens of Onondaga County. And what we can say is that the legislators and the people who are elected shouldn't be drawing their own districts. And a couple cities have taken it up where they have. It's been really, really successful. And when these independent redistricting and these changes go to the people and they are voted on, I think it's almost a 75% approval rate.
Oh, 75% approval rating from the population, from the
electorate. Yes. Yep.
And they love seeing that they're drawing the lines and not the elected representatives, correct?
Yeah. So in the model, I guess what I've kind of worked with, and I've been on the phone and working with them, is Austin, Texas. So Austin, Texas, and working with the city, Syracuse too. And the city, you guys took it up, and that's kudos to you and well done and great job. Helen and I were working on this for a while, and I think that yourself and a lot of others, including taking the reins and getting out in front of it. So, and what I'm saying, what I want to change is I want to scrap the whole way that we do it, amend the county charter and the administrative codes that go along with it, and say we're going to widely publicize it. The county comptroller, he publicizes it. We widely publicize it. Then people are able to, residents of the county are able to sign up. They're able to volunteer. Then they are kind of, if you will, taken out conflicts of interest if you serve a spouse, or if you worked for the county, or you've bundled money for county electeds, or you got a no bid contract. So all of that. So it's on the up and up. And then a review panel, and then you take it down. And then they randomly select 10 members of those signed up, and then the 10 that are appointed then pick 7 additional. And to the extent possible, reflective of good governance groups, academia, scholars, or other organizations that are associated with redistricting or fair maps or good governance. So I think it's a great law. And listen, not just because I've sponsored it and wrote it, but I'm just saying that what we can do, what we're doing now, isn't a good mechanism. I don't feel as though the process that we have is a good one. And I think if we put the power back into the people's hands, and we provide them with the census data, and they can preserve the neighborhoods, make them contiguous, that are much more reflective of, I guess, good districts instead of what the paper wrote about back 10 years ago. So, and I said it before, I've said it in many meetings, I'll say it now. When Rick Moriarty wrote the article and said they look like peninsulas and crustaceans and eagles taking flight, I don't think that that's a good product, and we can do better. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see here. So what are some, you mentioned Austin. Are there some other examples, some other, places that you guys are looking to that are, that are shining examples of getting it right? Well,
San Diego, the city of San Diego adopted going back, I think that was probably over a decade ago. Other cities in California authored similar legislation, but they were different because there was, the population is much different. So it was a lot more funding behind it. They were actually paying the commissioners of the members of the Citizens Commission. We kind of scaled that back a little bit. We reduced the number of people on there. So, but for the most part, it is after Austin, Texas, and what Austin, Texas was able to accomplish. Yes.
Right. So that brings up a point. So this redistricting effort, I mean, one of the things that I always quote, there's this great author, Jared Diamond, who wrote the book Collapse, about how different societies fall apart and things. And when asked about things that were really, really potentially hazardous for America, he mentioned unfair maps and redistricting in a way that doesn't, that's not representative. But in researching this, it seemed kind of like this is more of an art than a science. Like when we were doing it in Syracuse, there doesn't seem to be like a tight criteria for how you make a map or what's a fair map. It's kind of up to discretion of the individual, right? Or do you feel that you've kind of found that there are some best practices that we try to increase? Because I think people don't realize, like, so the reason those things are looking like, crustaceans and falcons taking flight and everything is because they're trying to catch, get this many Republicans up here and this many Democrats on there to try to take them out of different things to maintain, and both parties have done it. It's not just a one party thing
Right.
in the past. So, people do it. So what would, in your research or do you have feelings on that? I couldn't get a quite concise answer out of the people that exactly what is a good map and how do we do it fair? What are the criteria that we're looking for to make a fair map?
Well, that's a good question. And the question is that there really isn't a really solid answer. And I think the ambiguity leads to one or other parties leaving with a bad taste, right? Not just the party that was on the didn't like the way the maps were drawn, but also the citizens who don't know that, like, the town of DeWitt was carved up into 4 legislative districts, or you live on the north side of the city, which literally from that area, if you go in right, and I represent part of the north side, and I love that part of the district, but you have another legislator who comes in from Liverpool, who represents Liverpool and Lakeland, who cuts into that. Then you have another legislator who is predominantly the east side or Eastwood area. They got a little piece of that. And then a DeWitt person comes into that. And then you also have 2 DeWitt people that come in, the Village of East Syracuse. So that whole area is falling under like 5 different legislators, right? So you have the town of Geddes, was always one district, one legislative district. Now it's carved up to 3. And one area of the town of Geddes is kind of, and listen, I'm going to say that the person that represents Judy Disson represents that district. She would have found a job, but I think that the people in Geddes like, well, that doesn't really work out. That doesn't seem right. So I think that's a philosophical question. But whether that's good, right, wrong, or different, I don't think it's right. That's why I think we should change it. But the deviation between a population, so each district, that's what gets challenged. But then a lot of you see many court cases across the country where these maps are challenged. And it's important to say, it's also important to know when there's also data. It says that when the citizen-led redistricting commissions redraw maps, they're either not legally challenged or they 90% of the time stand up, versus like 40% when you have electeds redrawing them basically for themselves, if you will. Those districts get challenged often, and a lot of times, like the Supreme Court case was an infringement upon one's voter rights and freedom of speech, because you are basically saying that you're redistricting, and then you're infringing upon my rights to choose my elected representative. So, so I think that they should be. I mean, realistically, they should be contiguous, right? Neighborhoods shouldn't be sliced up. There should be geographical boundaries, whether it's a lake or, or quadrants. And those are symbolic of good groups or good mapping and good districts. But we don't have that in the legislature. If you just, all you have to do is look at the map, and you could easily tell the way the city is I don't think anybody can say that's a really good product.
Right. No, it's crazy. I encourage everyone. I should have downloaded a map to insert here to show people, but the Onondaga County Legislature map is just absolute travesty of it doesn't take much to look at that and realize that it's hinky. It doesn't work. So in trying to pitch this effort, which I think is tremendously important, what's the sales pitch as far as cost involved? Have you talked through, like, do you have projections, and what were some of the costs like in other areas that have done this fair mapping type of effort? Is it a costly endeavor, or?
Well, it depends, right? It depends on how much, like, so in the California model where they're actually paying people to be on the commission, then it gets costly and it gets expensive. And we all know that as of right now, we're in a little bit of tough times with budgets. But, what I keep saying, the heavy lifting on this won't really be done until the end of 2021 or 2022, when they actually roll up their sleeves and the commission is seated and starts doing the work. So, but the other thing too, no matter what their price is, and it's not like it's going to be $1 million, right? Not even, probably under mine wouldn't even cost $100,000, a lot less than that.
Right.
But at the same point is, at what point in time do you put a price on good governance, right? And that's a question I think that we need to ask ourselves as lawmakers. How much? So regardless of the cost, what is the price, and what do we have the taxpayers pay for a really good process and fair districts and fair maps? So, but there was SACPA. I've had conversations with the SACPA. They'll have to do the mapping since they're already ahead of it, right? The SACPA is great. They do tremendous work, and they're already collecting, working with the census data. They all already have the GIS and they have the mapping. So I'm fairly confident as they are that they will be able to do that in-house. The county comptroller, who is the person who actually publicizes it, and then will actually go back looking through and remove people for their conflicts of interest. And that question came up in Ways and Means. I look at the comptroller's office, much like the auditor's office. They're a separate entity, right? They're the oversight. So I think that they're fair, they're balanced. Comptroller Marty Mastropole has said that whatever he needs to do it, quote unquote, in-house, I think he would be willing to. I'm looking to have that same conversation with the county clerk's office. I think that we really need to just chip in and say, this is what we need to do. And it should not be a costly endeavor. But I'll say this last point with that. There is going to probably have to be some legal costs associated. So just like the SACPA comptroller's office and hopefully other departments, county legal can do what the county legal does. We have a really good, our county law department we have great lawyers, sharp lawyers. They do a great job. And I think that they can do as much as they can do in-house, but inevitably beyond the finished product, if, to stand up to any lawsuit or litigation, we're going to have outside counsel, kind of take a look at it. And that might be a little costly, but I'm thinking maybe $30,000, $40,000. If that, so, and that's worth it, because if that can stand, I'd rather have somebody who does and then we have good voting lawyer. We have a lot of election lawyers that can take a look at that, which I'd be, I'll save to know, I'll sleep better at night knowing that they have a second look at it and these maps are good. So, so that's where we're at as far as the budgetary. I don't think it's going to be expensive at all. I really don't. And so I think I think we took care of that.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it in scale, I forget exactly how much, but a lot of people sleep. A lot of people, and not to speak ill of the legislature, but a lot of times people are focused on mayor and executive and county, and people forget about the body of the county legislature and the amount. I mean, when you look at the amount of influence counselors have as compared to county legislators, I mean, you guys overlook a budget of what, 5 times the magnitude of what the city's looking at or something. What's the county budget roughly? I mean, ballpark.
Close to $1 billion, just a little bit over.
Yeah, a little over $1 billion. as opposed to a couple of $100 million for the city budget. So it's a much.
Well, Counselor, I've long since said that the legislative branch of government, I know that you would agree with me, is the hardest working branch of government there is.
I would agree with you.
Yeah, policy, budget. So yeah, and listen, we just have to budget it. That's all there is to it. Like I said, and this is going to be because, and you know what, the other point too is if we don't change how we do it, and the district maps look like they do now, and the finished product isn't better than it was before, I would probably guess that somebody would probably bring forth some challenge that in a court of law, those districts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah. I think, when you're talking about something like, $30,000, $40,000, $100,000, it sounds a lot if you're talking about, your budget for the year as a family. But when you look at city government or county government, you're talking about $1 billion plus,
Right.
billion, $1.2 billion or whatever for the budget. It's small potatoes to make sure that it's done fairly.
Yes.
And that, that we're doing best practices to make sure we're getting a fair shake when we do elections. So tell us a little bit about the Fair Maps Pledge. That this was an effort that went on during this past year, getting people to commit. So tell us about the Fair Maps and what went on.
Yeah,
with
and let me just say that some of the advocacy that friends of mine and a good governance groups, Fair Maps CNY, we did that, and there was that Fair Maps Pledge, and I think all of my colleagues, I think all but two, don't quote me on that, signed that pledge that they would enact and work towards fair maps and redistricting.
Yeah, and I understand you kind of started to initiate the conversation, and instantly there was pushback. So for me, seeing, I'll just say this, and I'm not speaking for you or any other legislators or anything. This is just me, my personal opinion. When I saw all the pledges come back of all the different county legislators committing to a fair maps and committing to ending this as I feel, really unfair policy of rigging the maps to get the intended outcome. I thought one thing's, wow, that's impressive that all these people are signing on. Most of the bulk of the legislators are signing on to this. And I also thought, are they gonna vote for it? It's one thing when you're in a campaign season and that people can use this point against you as they're campaigning to get on board with an initiative. But then when you bring up the legislation, are they going to be supportive? And I understand you tried to initiate the conversation around the legislation, and there was pushback almost right away.
Yeah, well, I think I have, as far as pushback goes in our initial Ways and Means, but when we had the conversation at our session, then it got pushed back to Ways and Means, and we had a pretty lengthy conversation through at Ways and Means, and some questions on it, and do we think that the districts are gerrymandered, and just specific questions that came up, notwithstanding budget. But as far as the fair maps goes, some of my colleagues, and I was happy to see them. I was happy because I've been probably working on this for 4 or 5 years. So seeing that my colleagues were willing to step up and sign the pledge, but I guess fair maps is, I don't know. It's I can't speak. I would not want to speak for anybody who had an opinion of how they signed the pledge or wanted to sign the pledge, but I know that they support independent redistricting, and I'm hopeful. So my law is going to be on the agenda for July 7th. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that will pass because I think it's a good piece of legislation. But I'm hopeful that those that signed the pledge are willing to work with me. That are willing to say, okay, well, and listen, I'll say this too, and I said it because it was on the Ways and Means. I said, listen, I am open. If I am open to discussion about this, if any one of my colleagues, not just those are the members of Ways and Means, especially those that signed the Fair Maps Pledge, supportive of independent redistricting, I would take 80% of something instead of 100% of nothing. So I'm being realistic about it. And if you want to, and I'm hopeful that some of my colleagues will reach out in an effort to and make it a bipartisan effort. So as of right now, I don't have a Republican co-sponsor, so it's not necessarily bipartisan now. So we'll see what happens. We still have some time.
Yeah. So two questions I had. One, there's a question coming up in the comments. Where do we need to be? How low do we need to get before they roll this back? Just how much of a ruckus should we plan on? Because that's what it seems like it's going to take. The other question I had was, how do we hold these legislators accountable, the ones that have signed the pledge? It seems like, from my reading of it, that signing on for fair maps in a vague thing, might not be the legislation as well. What role do you think the grassroots pressure comes in, and the effort of the voters to hold people accountability who have committed to this initiative and concept? But I guess it's early to say, but is there some role for, as you said, you're hopeful that, the conversations are just starting and some of your Republican colleagues will come in and like, as you said, come to some kind of agreement on it. But is there a role here for the grassroots, and how do citizens who are frustrated, I think a lot of us who've been paying attention are really, really frustrated and are looking for, we want to make sure there's accountability and that this really goes through. Is there some role that the citizens can play?
Absolutely. And I know that there have been a lot of people, many people that have been working hard and are frustrated. So, I mean, this isn't necessarily, they started this out in San Diego. So all the way from the West Coast into Texas. And this isn't a city of Syracuse issue. It's not an Onondaga County issue, not a New York issue. This is a national issue. And it's not just Democrat versus Republican or whoever it is, because I'm not going to say that in all other places that they weren't gerrymandered from a different party, right? So, and I don't want to put labels on anybody or anything. I'm just saying that I think overall, I think that the public is, I think, disenfranchised, right, with elected officials. And the more that they do said, okay, great, yeah, this is great. So the people that redraw them to thing, that's, that disenfranchises voters even more. And now you have public engagement, civic engagement, and there's been quite a bit of publicity around this and a lot of activism. And I know that a lot of those activists are calling those legislators that pledged to support independent redistricting and want to know how they're going to vote. And I think and I know for a fact that they're asking and said, you support independent redistricting, you signed the Fair Maps Pledge. Are you going to support this local law? And I don't exactly know what everybody's been saying, but I know, but a couple of them said that they support nonpartisan redistricting. They just don't support my local law. So I don't really know what that means, because those aren't my words, but I just say, and get to their point. And I said this too, with my willingness to work with it, I'll take 80% of something instead of 100% of nothing. But as I said, I'm willing to take some feedback. I would love some constructive criticism. If you think that if one of my colleagues wants to change this and it passes, but I can only, what I've been saying consistently, I'd be willing to move the goalpost back, but I can't move the goalpost back so far that then it changes the integrity of my law, because anything short of an independent redistricting commission and a true democratic process, independent process that is civic engagement, academia, which is symbolic of our, all of the different types of groups that we have in neighborhoods. So anything short of that is going to be unacceptable. And that's not something I can live with, but I'm hopeful we can get there. Yeah.
So they haven't clarified what the distinction is between supporting fair maps and what they don't like about your legislation yet. They've just said they just don't like your legislation. That's as far as the conversation has gone.
Correct.
Okay. So I'll take this moment to let folks know that, you can, a simple Google search can find all your county legislators in Onondaga County. You can find their emails quite easily. And speaking as a legislator myself, I know it really does mean something. You might think that, I think I actually wrote a lyric back when I, in my former career as a musician, about how, politicians wouldn't listen if you reach out. But really, when we get 20 emails in our inbox, it's only 20. And that's like, that's not a ton of people. but it makes an impact. It shows us that there's a larger group out there that's concerned about this, and that people are paying attention, that people are watching. So, even if it's just a handful of people, hold your legislators accountable. If they've committed to this, reach out to them to say you want to know, what they plan on doing to honor that pledge and what their support is going to be. So I guess I would ask, from there, how do we break this cycle then? In some of these places when one party has the majority and they continue to draw the maps non-independently, it tends to be on that majority to break the cycle, right? I mean, what do we do? How do you think we react if they do continue to make maps the way they've done? How do we end this? I think is it just awareness or?
Well, definitely awareness. I think that this certainly has brought light, shed some light on a practice that needs to be changed. I know that when the newspaper did the article, Rick Moriarty wrote that article almost 10 years ago, and there was a reaction. And I think that citizens on the county, city of Syracuse are saying, this doesn't look right. And this isn't how government's supposed to work for me. So I think that the conversation shifted by way of just doing this, whether my law passes or fails on July 7th. We've already started. I mean, listen, I'm not looking for moral victories here. I want to pass this law, but if for nothing else, I think we started a conversation, and I know that there's no possible way that they can repeat the process and have those districts look like they do again. So but then again, I don't really know that. I guess that's a hypothetical statement, but I think we've already started the conversation. It's changed. We just have to bring this home and get this because anything short of listen, at the end of the day, we should have citizens drawing them out, independent citizens who want to be engaged, and who wouldn't want the citizens of the county to be engaged in government? Who wouldn't want to say this is what they should be in whatever district they have? And the other thing too is a lot of people say, well, it's just about the numbers. It's not about the numbers. I'm not trying to change this, and my goal is not to have a Democratic majority. Or a reaction to me upset about being in the being the Republican majority and a Democratic minority. I just think it's a bad process, and it's not a good process, not the way it should be. And citizens should be involved. So we'll see how that happens. I'm hopeful that we get done something.
Yeah, I've had that pushback as well. That the only reason for taking this up is a partisanship, and I wholeheartedly disagree. I've said the same thing as you. In the city of Syracuse, we have 8 Democrats and 1 Republican. There's not really a lot of conflict right now. The voter enrollment is about 3-1 Democrat to Republican within the city limits, but we still felt it really important to take this up as just best practice, as just lawmakers should not be deciding who their electorate is, and drawing these maps themselves when there's an inherent conflict of interest. And I think that's the real issue. We got to keep it focused on that. So, Missy Ross, are they voting party lines again on this? So to clarify, people, this hasn't been introduced yet. You're going to be introducing this, you believe, at the July 7th session, correct?
Yes, it will. Yeah, and we did not, and the vote was not. So what happened at our Ways and Means Committee was that the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, he decided, Legislator Burtis, they decided they would not be taking a vote on it. But nonetheless, it's a local law, and it will be on the July 7th meeting. So we have to do it by July 7th, because anything later that we wouldn't be able to put it on the ballot in November. So it has to be done. So I'm looking at it's going to, one way or another, it will either pass or will be defeated on the 7th.
Yeah. So if people want to get active, now is the time.
Now's the time.
Yeah. So, and again, not to make this a partisan issue, but just so people understand the dynamics that are going on right now in the legislature. One thing that I always talk about here, and it's a nuanced issue as well, but the Democrats do have a 30,000 enrollment advantage within Onondaga County, yet last year it was 12 Republicans to 5 Democrats, and the Republicans held a supermajority, and the Democrats were in a super minority. And it was my goal, myself and a lot of other people who are working with the Democratic Party, to break that super minority, super majority situation. And we've done that this past year. So there's now 6 Democrats and 11 Republicans. So can you explain the dynamic of a supermajority and the minority, and what the distinction between having 5 and 6 means, and why that was important?
Yeah, well, that means, so when we bond for capital improvement projects, it just gives us a bigger voice, actually a much louder voice, because we have the ability to vote against bonding, and then that limits the ability to bond for specific projects, or if there's something that we were, I'll say this, in most of the time we vote the same, right? Well, it's a county government, right? Where we keep the parks open, we have the sheriff's department, jail, district attorney's office, the county water and environmental protection. But there's certain circumstances where if it looks like it's a capital improvement project, or if it looks like it's the bonding is going to be too much, or we're spending too much money here, not enough money there, then we have the ability to vote that. We have the ability to say yay or nay. So it gives us the ability to say, okay, well, we're gonna be part of this conversation. Where previously, between if not having 6, they would just say, well, yeah, okay, well, we don't really need to concern because we got the votes to pretty much pass it. So, and that doesn't, and you know what, it doesn't happen often, but it's the checks and balances, right? And so I think that's important. That's that's the foundation of this whole democracy, right? Checks and balances, legislative branch and the judicial branch and the executive branch. So that's what makes this democracy great. But it's just better for democracy, and it's better when people have the voice. I mean, like you said, for all the Democrats are enrolled in the Democratic Party, or whether you're no party affiliation, you might say that we shouldn't be spending that much money on that, or we should be spending money there. So it's better for government if there's with super majorities is not good.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really happy about that. That was a goal that we set for ourselves last cycle, and we weren't able to get there. And I'm really happy we got there this election cycle and broke that supermajority, and at least starting to get some more footing, as you said, checks and balances, keeping each other in check. So again, this is kind of in a separate bucket from the conversation we're having. But if the Democrats were to have a majority, if we were to get up to, a few more Democrats in there, 2 or 3 more, what do you think are some of the things that might go through or might run differently, or things that have happened in the past that you think would have been different had you had more Democrats in there?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would bring back my Adrian's Law, because when the dog froze to death, and we could have done a better job, and we tried to amend that law, and it was defeated by 1 vote. That would be the first thing I would do. The second thing, well, I'm hopeful that we would have a bigger context and see where the direction we want to take and how much cooperation we want to do with the towns and the villages and the city. And I definitely would. I think that we could do a lot on the policy side. I think we could adapt to enact some policies that would be beneficial to all county residents. I think that we could strengthen some of our public safety. There's some work to do on the public safety committees and some other work. So it's a loaded question because I don't know where it would go, but I'm just thinking of the other laws that I've already passed. I'd introduce a legislation for the apprenticeship language. I think we should have apprenticeship language on all public sport projects. I think we've done a great job as far as MWB, but we have a lot to go. We have a long way to go on that.
Maybe explain that for some folks who don't know the acronym. So what is MWBE, and why would apprenticeships be important, and how does that factor into what's going on in Onondaga County?
Well, as far as minority women business owned enterprises, I think that we have enacted. So we have And listen, the county executives talked about this poverty, generational poverty. How do you want to get that? So I think that we could have some apprenticeship programs. I think we needing to change or train our next generation of workforce. We have a lot of county projects, and or if the county is bidding, or hopefully with this county, city, town, village, if there's some improvements and the taxpayers are funding it, we should utilize that. And we should train our next generation of workforce. So any project that's going on that is out to public bid should have apprenticeship language on that. So, and that gives people an opportunity and gives county residents a path for a career. I think that's great language, and I've been trying to pass that. I've been working on that for 3 years, and I can't get any traction with it. PACE, you did the PACE. Congratulations, you did that. I've been trying to introduce that. I think that if we had the majority, we would get that done. Those are just a few things. I mean, right off the top of my head, I think where we would go. I think we've done a pretty good job budget-wise in what we've been funding. The tax levy, the tax rates are low, but we can build upon what we've been doing. And I think that there's a couple pieces of legislation that we would get through, which would be beneficial to county residents first.
Yeah, absolutely. So and switching tracks here for a second. You said you kind of came into politics as a union guy, working with CWA, Communication Workers of America. So just talking in that hat for a minute. It's been kind of for me. I would say that a thing that comes to my mind often is that they did an experiment where they said, draw a picture of what the Republican Party is. They just took people off the street, random people, and I think like 80% of them drew a dollar sign, like money sign, like they love business, they're the money guys, blah 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 blah. And it was drawn and then what is a Democrat? What's the Democratic Party? And a lot of people didn't know what to draw. They didn't know. And I take that as
I don't know if I would.
Right, like and I think it's like, and I think we come from a time where the birth, the kind of iron that was set in America was the Democratic Party and the unions and that whole relationship. And for me, I was just kind of stunned that some, while many of the union heads went with Hillary in the 2016 election, it seemed like a lot of union guys, from what reporting was saying, were going with Trump. So, I would ask, what do you think about, that national scene on unions and what can we do better as the Democratic Party, and how is this happening, with what's going on, in your opinion?
Well, like I always say to my union members, what we do is we're here because as a president of our local, right, it's negotiate the terms and conditions, right? I want to make sure that the members of CWA or everybody else, I think every single American deserves a voice on the job, right? And everybody deserves to get a good day's pay for an honest day's pay for an honest day's work. And unfortunately, sometimes without a voice in the job, and the people don't have that opportunity. We command a good wage rate because we've negotiated contracts for the years. But I always say to my members, like, listen, I don't want to get into a philosophical debate or an ideological debate, whether it's your guns or here or there or anything else. It doesn't matter. But what we all have one thing in common, right, is that the local laws, labor laws, all work for us. And the party that strengthens the local labor laws and provide you with a voice on the job is what's important, and that's what we have. And I think that in many instances, historically, throughout the years, I think that the unions have gravitated a little bit more for the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party, promotes unionism and provides that. It isn't like given. And I got to say, it's a county issue, but on a national level, you've seen where they have these humongous tax breaks to billionaires, right? You've seen where they have given tax breaks to companies that offshore their work. When we went on strike in 2016, understand one of the first initial proposals they were want to move off of was to send all of our work that they could over to India, what was the other one? In the Pacific Rim, right? So and we've lost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs overseas because of laws and tax breaks to do that. And it's all about, if you look at how much their average wage earner works now versus CEO salary, going back to like within the 80s, it's astronomical. Like we were at a tipping point where corporate profits and corporate growth have been much different. It's different now. Like we have Verizon and the CWA. We are doing much better now than we were before. It's a much, much, much better working relationship, and I'm happy for that. And it's great. And I hope every other company, every other employer does the same. And it says those guys deserve more money. Our guys and the men and women who work for this corporation should get a raise, because then they can circulate that back into the economy. So I don't know why people are against that, but and then on a national level, I would just say to this, just go up to, I think it's Labor 411, right? Go up and look and see what the Labor Board on national level has done for workers' rights since Trump has been president. Just go up and see for yourself. If you're a union person or you want a voice in the job, just look and see what that is, and you would be appalled and sickened.
Yeah. So maybe you can talk to some of that. What does it look like for unions during the era of Trump, and what has gone on at the federal level? Have unions fared better or worse under this administration?
Well, I think one of the first things you did is wanted to push anti-union laws. That's the first thing. It's been a travesty. It's soft, and workers' rights have been trampled on, and that's all there is to it. I mean, you just can't even. It's corporate. I mean, listen, when you have a billionaire, right, who's never been a friend of labor, I think does he still owe cities? And I think he still owes people money from the hotel he built down in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
It doesn't pay his bills. I mean, I don't know why anybody would expect that he would be good for labor, but maybe people don't. I don't know. Maybe that, not to be political, I guess I'm being overly political, but that's a question. And on a federal level, the laws that we have been passed haven't been beneficial to workers.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we start to wind down, what are your sentiments to people about, to bring it back to this, really important legislation you're bringing up with fair maps? What are your, final words to folks or thoughts about this moving forward? What do you think is important for people to know, and what can the citizens do to show their support for, a more equitable and fair Onondaga County?
Yeah, I guess if you're out there and you listen, I guess just start the conversation, right? Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. I think it's it's not necessarily I think there's been some publicity on it, but I don't think it's, on the forefront. It's not especially not what people are thinking about now. A little bit of bad timing, but contact your legislator and ask them if they're for it, because I think at the end of the day, again, it's not drawing districts, right, to be beneficial to one party versus the other. It's about an independent redistricting commission that is made up of citizens, not lawmakers, to redraw the district. So I think if you're out there and if it's important to you, I would just call up your legislator and say, listen, you represent me in county government, and I want to know how you feel about the local outcome, about redistricting. Are you for it? Are you against it? Are you not for it? Tell me why, and get your thoughts. Get their thoughts and say you support it, and you hope they would do the same.
Yeah. And I encourage everyone, if you've never done it before, it's very easy to do. You just, Google Onondaga County Legislators. You can find their contact information, contact their offices and ask them, what they plan to do about this legislation. Because I just want to, remind people that many of them signed the pledge to say that they would support fair maps, they would support independent redistricting, and sometimes the devil's in the details there. What defines fair maps to them, and what defines independent redistricting to them? And I think it's pretty clear from what Chris just said what that means, and what that what that definition is. It means taking it out of the hands of the lawmakers and putting it into the hands of the citizens, of the electorate, and the people should be deciding, not the lawmakers. And we in Syracuse, this was a ballot initiative that we had last cycle, and it was overwhelmingly people in favor of it. And like Chris said, 75% of the voting public supports these kind of initiatives where there's less chances to rig the game. The politicians don't decide what their political boundaries are, and I think that's a win-win for everyone. Well, Chris, I thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I think we got some important information out there. I hope and pray, and we'll get it out there to the people some more. Anything else you want to say to the folks before we call it a wrap?
Whoever's out there and was tuning in, thank you for joining. Thank you for your time. Councilor Driscoll, thank you very much. And stay safe over on the east side there.
Thanks. You too, West Side. All right.
Okay.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to Chris Ryan for coming on. And remember that legislation is coming forth on July 7th. So reach out to your county legislators and let them know you want to see fair maps for Onondaga County. Have a good one, y'all.